says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell-Gillard!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to preview and I guess review the weekend that is and was is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, as we record, the Jersey Flegg have already played, but we've still got that big public holiday doubleheader to cover.
Yeah, we certainly have. We've got the Monday matches. Last night, the Eels were in action against the Bulldogs at Belmore in the Jersey Flegg. So we'll commence our podcast with, as you said, that little bit of a review before we hit the previews. But of course, as always, a big shout out to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf at Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narelle and Parramatta, without whom, as you know, we just wouldn't be able to do what we do on the Cumberland Throw. So thank you to both of our partners there.
Yes, sir. All right, let's get right into the, the review portion of this podcast. Unfortunately, the Jersey Flegg Sixties, they're doing it tough right now. A lot of bodies and a lot of big players unavailable. Bulldogs, who they're taking on this week and one of the better teams in the competition, entered the round in fourth, finished in second after defeating the Eels 22-6, which gives you an idea of how they're travelling. For the Eels, Larry Mo'unga Tutia scoring the late try in the 66th minute with Apa Tweedle converting. And aside from that, the Dogs put on 4 tries, 3 conversions. Good day for the goal kicker, Jonathan Sewer. And not much doing here for Parramatta, mate. We weren't out there to see it. We're busy on the day, obviously. But for the Eels, just got to, they got to push for that breakthrough win, and just get back to that winning feeling and building from there.
Absolutely, and it's always going to be that adjustment when you've got so many players out with injury. We've got Ethan Sanders, who had transition from the SG ball team into being the starting half in the Jersey Flegg, but he's been out for a period of time with a broken hand. He's probably still a couple of weeks away from that, is returning from that. The replacement, interchange dummy half, Matt Arthur, he's suspended for a couple of weeks. So we have him missing in action there. And of course, we haven't been able to see Blaze Talangi in action due to an injury, and he's probably a month or so away from making his return to the field. So, as you said, tough night, but that sort of scoreline against a team that was currently sitting in second place on the ladder, for the number of players that are being introduced from the SG ball team, I still think it's and playing out of position. We should add as well a few players. So still not too bad, and looking forward to hopefully catching their next match live as well. So, mate, I guess now we move into the previews for the weekend.
Yes, indeed. The King's birthday, one day public holiday. Quentin Gufferson been very magnanimous with our time, looking after us as always. Thank you, Guffo. But yes, with obviously the change in the monarchy over in England, it's now the King's birthday, and it brings us to the New South Wales Cup, where it's going to be a tough one, 60s, because the Eels enter this round in 8th. They're taking on the first place team in the Canterbury Bulldogs. These two teams have already met back in round 7. Canterbury brushed us off 28-6. Eels also coming off a little bit of a probably you'd argue a poor patch of form after they dropped the game against the Newcastle Knights, who came running last in the competition. But prior to that, they took on the team that was at the time running first in the North Sydney Bears. I mean, they brushed them off like birds, I suppose, but the Bears and ambushed them. So I don't know what to expect from the Parramatta Eels in this game, mate. But if we look at the actual lineups here, it's not great reading for the Parramatta Eels. At fullback, it's Zach Sini. You got Hayes Dunster back to help the back line. Jiran Momasia, Isaac Lumi, Chris Tupou. Daejarn Asi is currently named at 5'8". If we're not expecting him to stay there, Jordan Rankin at halfback. You got the young kid, Jonte Junior Beffin-Meza, who was making a real fist of it in the New South Wales Cup. He's starting at one of the bookend positions alongside Kai Rodwell. Manny Luke at dummy half. You've got Jack Murchie, Dan Keir, and Luca Moretti rounding out the back row. On the interchange, it's Nico Apelu, Tony Matteelli, Tavita Taumapenu, and Jock Brazel, who was a withdrawal from that Jersey Flegg game, so his resources are completely dedicated to the New South Wales Cup this week. But yeah, they're taking on a Dogs team that, like I said, really easily accounted for us last time. Blake Wilson was on the wing in that game and went for over 200 metres and a couple of tries. He's at fullback this week. Braden Burns. There's a new player they got up from Queensland, Ethan Quay Ward, Jarrell Skelton. The halves are a bit weaker this time, though, because obviously young Carlisle Wapu is playing in the halves in first grade, and also they've got Rajab, who was the other half in that game. He's on the interchange for first grade. So they've weakened their spine. But Ryan Sutton, Carl Flanagan, Sam Hughes, Jackson Topine, Fata Manu Brown. It's a pretty good team, 60s.
Yeah, it is. And as you said, we just don't know what to expect from Parramatta's New South Wales Cup team. The form has been wildly fluctuating. Not fluctuating a little bit, wildly fluctuating.
It's a proper sine curve, isn't it? Like the oscillations are going to the highest highs and the lowest lows.
Yeah, last week they were taken down by a Newcastle team that was sitting down near the bottom of the ladder, and they were well and truly spanked in that game. Well and truly spanked. It was, I don't know if you could call it a contest. It was, they were just comprehensively outplayed. And we were expecting that, yes, there were a number of players that were out of position. We had forwards who were playing out in the back line, but it was just, well, they just were never really competing in the match. It was flat, wasn't it? Like it was, there wasn't really any intensity in performance. There wasn't the sort of impact in the carries that we saw in their game against the Bears. And it was pretty much a similar team, and yeah, it's hard to put it into words exactly what's going on with the team. But I guess that's, to an extent, that's the nature of lower grade football, isn't it?
Yes,
is that you get inconsistency of performance, and the players that are able to be more consistent in their plays, they're the ones that you see pushing for first grade selection. And also, I guess you can't underestimate the loss of Jake Arthur steering the team around the paddock. And I think you saw last week, especially, how his departure has been felt.
Agreed, mate. And speaking of the absence in the halves, I have legitimately no idea what we're going to do at number 6 if Daejarn Asi is being called up to the NRL to replace Dylan. Ethan Sanders, broken hand. He's not far off, but he's not going to be playing New South Wales Cup this week, surely. Josh Lynn, he was an absentee from the Jersey Flegg team. I don't know if injury or suspension are in action there. Who are we going to play at 5'8"?
I've actually got zero idea what their plans would be there, because as far as the name team is concerned, there isn't really anyone who jumps out.
Like the stopgap solution I would have thought of might have been Jaden Yates, but he's not available, it looks like, for selection. Again, we don't know if injury or suspension are in play here because we don't get those sort of reports. I legitimately have no idea. The Eels are very, very, dry on depth half options right now. So it's very spooky, very, very spooky.
Well, then, I mean, is it out of the realms of possibility that Josh Lynn is available for?
That might be why he's not picked in Flegg. I don't know, because Mac Pofisi played Flegg in the game yesterday, so he's not an option to back up. And I really can't think of anyone like outside of like some really abstract option that they might have to put into there. There's no obvious candidate.
Yep. No, I've got no idea in that, and I haven't been able to get to training this week. It's been a very busy week, and I couldn't offer an informed opinion. That's for sure. And yeah, and I guess the other thing too, if I had been to training and seen what they were doing, is always that element of should I be? I can't really give away what I'm watching.
This is actually an important replacement, exactly. So,
I guess what I would be saying if I saw what the plans were is maybe, oh look, I'm comfortable with what they're doing. No, yes, they've got a solution. Don't worry too much. There's a solution there. That yes, they have got someone in mind and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really difficult, and perhaps we'll get an updated team list in the next 24 hours or so. So
perhaps.
But as things stand, you're looking at this and you're thinking we had more players available earlier in the year when we played them. Do you have an ominous feeling about this particular match?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know I was pretty down on our preview podcast when we were walking into the game against the North Sydney Bears, tipping us to probably lose handily because Jake had departed and the team looked pretty ordinary. And they obviously really surprised me. They had a great game, perhaps their best game of the season. But coming into this game, I've got the same vibes, but maybe even worse. Like, we've got a really fractured spine. We've got a back line where, I've already spoken about it in another podcast, but it's not a good back line. I don't want to put the boys down, but it's not a strong back line.
No, we've got too many players out of their natural position. And look, that's just the plain truth of it. I mean, Zach Sini's been asked to play fullback where he's centre wing position. You've got Wiremu Greig, who's a back rower. You've got Isaac Lumi, who's playing centre, who's
more
better known
winger.
as a winger. Chris Tupu, with respect, has been playing in Ron Massey Cup. And besides, Hayes has been out. Hayes is back in on the wing.
This is his first game back after a couple of weeks.
Yeah, he's been out for a number of weeks. Combinations, like more than anything else, it's just when you've got players they're now in different positions. So you've got the challenge where, say, Zach Sini at fullback, he's got to organise the defence in front of him. That hadn't been his responsibility playing out at centre. When you've got Hayes there, he's probably not too familiar with playing alongside his centre partner. You've got Isaac Lumi, as I said, who's, instead of defending out on the wing, he's defending closer in at centre. And Chris Tupu is not because he's not a part of NRL full-time squad. He's not getting as much training time with the team, so he's probably getting the captain's run with the team. So, and again, not being there this week, I don't even know what times they were training through the week. But if they're training through the middle of the day, which is more than likely in the early part of the week, then what chance do part-time footballers have of training with the team? So you look at that and you go, and I guess the same applies to Nico Pelu. So he's coming off the bench on in the 14 jersey. Again, also he's a part-time footballer. Again, he'd be someone that's not getting that opportunity to train when they're doing their daytime sessions. So they're up against it. They're up against it from preparations all the way through to just not having players in their accustomed positions. So as much as I hate doing this, I'd have to tip the Bulldogs to win comfortably in this one.
Agreed.
I mean, I'll be cheering wildly for the Eels, and I'm hoping that we get one of those weeks where they produce their better performances. I mean, to be honest, it would be the level of upset that we had when they defeated the Bears. So I guess if we lost last week, we got to be due for a bounce back this week because, as I said,
the sign
that's
oscillation.
how wildly oscillating
yeah.
the form has been. So, and I guess what we have to say as well is and I spoke about that inconsistency of performance, and that's generally what separates players who are regular NRL players with players who are playing at New South Wales Cup level, is that they get that consistency of performance right more often than not once they hit NRL level. But they have produced at various times this season. They've produced very good performances. So we have to think, well, it's not outside the realms of possibility that they can get a result here. But on the balance of probability, we'd say that a team that's sitting right at the top of the table is probably a fair chance of defeating the team that just lost to a team that was at the bottom of the table. That's the main form line we can go on.
And obviously this game is taking place out at the Core Stadium, 1:40 p.m. If you can't get out, it is available on Foxtel. I believe it'll be on KO2, even though it's not listed. But yeah, you got coverage on pay TV there. And that brings us to the main event, 60s. 4 o'clock p.m. on the King's birthday long weekend, at Core Stadium, Canterbury Bulldogs hosting the Parramatta Eels. And I was just looking at the background on this one, because the Eels, when they met in round 7, really like 30-4, and they weren't anywhere near their top gear, the Parramatta Eels. They just worked their way past the Bulldogs without going too high octane. But looking on our recent history, and geez, the Eels have had good runs. I think it's 6 of the last 7, 8 of the last 10, 12 of the last 15. So it's fair to say it's been pretty one-sided. Canterbury obviously haven't been doing too flash in that period, going through multiple coaches and being on a lengthy rebuild, a la what Parramatta went through, going back to what Brad Arthur had to do back when he took over, obviously in 2014. But let's get to the team list quickly. 60s. We'll start with our opponents, the Canterbury Bulldogs, with Hayes Perham, the former Eel Lockyer, custodial role at fullback there. Jacob Kiraz isn't in for them on the wing. Obviously a big inclusion there. In the centres, Jake Averill and Paul Alamotti. Be good to see Alamotti going up against Will Penasini again, and Averill has got that plenty of speed to have to look out for. Josh Adokar is on the other flank as he preps for Origin 2. In the halves, young Carla Wapu will be 5'8". Matt Burton captains the team at halfback. Front row, Max King, Reid Marnie Tavita Pangai Jr. And obviously we've already spoken about Reid Marnie being included in this roster, 60s, and the concussion protocols, everything about that. Jaden Ockenbaugh and Jacob Preston, their breakout player of the year, on the edges. Harrison Edwards locks the scrum. On the interchange, young Khaled Rajab, who was the other half that I was speaking about in the New South Wales Cup game that we played back in round 7. He's going to be on the interchange, and I'm not really sure what he offers. Is he playing? Because I think he played last week. Did he play out of dummy half? I'm not really sure, but he's joined on the roster, or the rotation roster, by Curtis Moran, Chris Patolo, and Corey Waddell. It's not a pretty bench on paper, but I'm sure they'll get the job done for the Dogs. Extended roster, Carl Flanagan, Jackson Topine, Braden Burns, Blake Wilson, and Franklin Pele. Any quick comments on the Dogs roster before I go through the Eels, 60s?
They've got us for pace in the backs. Got us seriously for pace.
Yeah,
you
know there's going to be some sort of trick shot early kick at some point in this game. So three, Sevo, Russell, and Gufferson have to be awake to that.
Yeah, and that's really. This is where I have my concerns, is that we know the amount of defensive cover that Dylan Brown provides. He just shuts down breaks when they're, even before they happen.
And
it just
oftentimes at the very last moment too, as we saw against the Cowboys with one of the cover tackles of the season.
Yeah, but it's even, I've watched it carefully. It's his defensive positioning almost gets teams to change their mind or to change the runs as they're happening, as they're getting into attacking shapes. It just can't be underestimated the value that he provides to our defence out wide, and I've been less concerned about teams getting around us this year. We're operating a really good slide defence in that regard. We've probably leaked more through the middle than we have out on the wings or centres. So, and look, to an extent, Mitch Moses is quite good with a not dissimilar sort of cover to Dylan Brown. He's probably not in the elite defensive class that Dylan Brown is, but he's pretty damn good, Mitch Moses. He doesn't get enough credit for that. But yeah, that pace of the Bulldogs concerns me. I'm looking at the Bulldogs pack, workmanlike is probably how I describe their pack. So, and of course, we've spoken at length about them getting clearance for Reid Marnie to play. My last comment on that again is let's just forget about that 11-day protocol exists, obviously. Let's just say that the new procedure is, yes, you stand down with those 11 days, but you know what? If you want to, let's go through an independent doctor and get an assessment, and you can play, like regardless of the 11 days. It's like, no, he's got no symptoms now. Forget the fact that it actually happened, because it happened. The concussion happened. So how is it that, okay, no, everything looks good now. Yeah, he should be right to play.
Yeah.
Again,
yes, indeed.
What happens? Is there no line? Are there no lines here? Is it all grey area? Because to me, when they announced the 11-day stand down, I thought as mandatory after a Category 1 concussion, I thought, well, that's it. That's the line. There is no grey area around that. It's 11 days.
I mean,
I guarantee you this. If anyone gets concussion in the preliminary finals leading into a grand final, there is no way that they won't be challenging the concussion ruling.
And as we record this game, it is Saturday morning. Sorry, record this podcast. It is Saturday morning, and last night the Warriors played a beautiful game against Canberra to upset Jared Croker's 300th. And I know that Sean Johnson came back and took a crazy intercept off a kickoff, and that may vindicate some people's opinions, but he was out cold. He was out cold last night. It wasn't friendly fire. It was just an incidental contact from Hudson Young. There actually wasn't anything malicious in it, but he got hit really hard head to head and was completely out of it. And he passed his concussion test. Like again, what are we doing here?
Yeah. It's confusing. Look, I'm confused as to why they would have put him on with only a couple of minutes left in the game.
Exactly.
Like, really, why? Like, I mean, we wouldn't be having that comment that you've made just then if they just left him on the bench, because the game was won. It was well and truly wrapped up.
But
he had no need to come back on?
Was, again, passing the concussion test on the day sort of like set up so he can play next week? The Warriors play next week? They do. No, they're on the bye, so it makes no sense why they'll do that.
No, that's right. He could have failed
the
concussion test, and it made no difference whatsoever, except for, maybe it would put down that he had a history of concussion when they were looking at anything in the future. But as I said to you, can you imagine, like, you could almost foresee that anyone who would have been ruled out before at a grand final, future grand finals, they'll be able to play, because they'll get through. More likely than not, they'll get through the any independent assessment.
Yep. Yes, indeed. All right. Enough about concussions. Enough about Bulldogs. Let's talk Parramatta Eels 60s. A couple of changes to this team, as we mentioned. Players coming in, players unavailable.
Can I just say, and I just want to say this, I'm sorry, John, for harping on about it, but the whole idea of the rule was to protect players.
Yeah, short and long term. Yes.
Yeah, short and long term. So I just don't get it. I just don't get it, because here we have now the first time, because this is it. This is the challenge. He's, I think, Tom Trbojevic was reclassified. He wasn't a Category 1 concussion. Am I right with that? That he wasn't a Category 1?
Initially, it was diagnosed Category 1 origin, and Manly reassessed it to be Category 2.
Yeah, so I don't think there was any reassessment with Reed Money. They're just saying, no, he's right. He's suffering no ill effects from the concussion. So, yeah, I just don't understand why you would risk the short term. Oh, yeah, as I said, the rule's supposed to be there for the health of the players. Throw that out the window.
It's a result-driven business. So.
Yeah, just throw it right out the window.
Anyway, let's talk Parramatta 60s. Some players unavailable this week. Wiremu Greig with the Lisfranc fracture. He's out long-term. Joe Ofahengaue, calf strain, 10 minutes into his club debut against the Cowboys. Dylan Brown.
Hang on, what number jersey were these blokes wearing? Is it a matter of the number?
Maybe.
That they've got in their back?
Maybe. There is something going on right now. We are snake-bitten in the forwards. Dillbags, well, obviously, that's something of his potential of his own doing there. He's been stood down by the NRL. We're waiting to see how that plays out in the coming weeks. But for the Eels, there are reinforcements this week, a big one in particular with Reagan Campbell-Gillard back. Junior Paulo, obviously, coming back from State of Origin duties, so the front row looks real schmick this week. But let's start at fullback, as always, with Captain Quinton Gufferson. The back line actually unchanged this week, which is really nice. So they paid their dues last year, didn't they, 60s? So they don't get the injuries this year. Mike Acevo, Sean Russell on the flanks. Will Penasini at right centre, Bowie Simon on the left. In the halves, well, Dylan is still named, but we do believe it's going to be Daejarn Asi stepping into that role. At least that's what the media is pointing us towards, where he'll partner Mitchell Moses, Daejarn, the mustard, working with Bowie Simonson, Mike Acevo, and we believe Andrew Davey on the left edge. Speaking of the forwards, though, Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Junior Barlow, already gave him a shout-out. They're starting alongside Josh Hodgson in the front row. Bryce Cartwright continues to have a spectacular season, honestly. He's going to be on the right, if I'm not mistaken, for Andrew Davey returning from his own concussion layoff, that mandatory 11-day window, where he'll be on the left. Jermaine Hopgood, who's pushing for Origin on his 60s. He's going to be starting at lock forward. On the interchange, Ofahengaue Ogden, Brendan Hands, Matt Doorey, and Makahesi Makatoa. Honestly, the way they're all playing that sort of quartet, a pretty good interchange 60s. Extended roster. Daejarn Asi's 18th man. We expect him to come into the team. Jack Murchie, Kai Rodwell, Hayes Dunster, and Luca Moretti. Match officials. Liam Kennedy. You got Ziggy running one of the sidelines. Matt Noyen on the other. Ben Cummings in the box.
Do I recall correctly Matt Noyen being the official in the video refereeing role for that try in the NRLW against it might have been the Knights against the Eels
last year,
where it was like nobody believed that the ball was grounded.
We're always saying you got Alzheimer's or old timers, mate, but that's good memory there because he was indeed the senior or box review official there for that game.
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of concern there. I hope he sees things better from the sideline. Liam Kennedy, less than impressive recently when he was officiating our match. I'm trying to think which one it was, but I think he basically put the whistle away during the game. Was it against the Cowboys? Was it the match against the Cowboys?
Maybe it was the Cowboys. I'll quickly pull that up now. Eels versus Cowboys. Team lists. And it was... Yeah, Liam Kennedy was the main official, sorry.
Yeah, he basically put the whistle away and the Cowboys were just slowing down the ruck horrendously.
Well, I'll say this. I suppose given that we copped absolutely ludicrous penalty counts against the Titans and the week after against Canberra, I suppose just not the whistle not being blown is probably better for us in a sort of neutral circumstance than getting killed with the P. So it's
I think think from memory, like the penalty count was something like 4-2 to
Yeah.
the Cowboys in that game. Was that right? Was it 4-2 to the Cowboys?
It
penalty
was
count?
penalties conceded. Eels conceded 4 to the Cowboys 2, correct.
Yeah, so we look at that and we go, okay, we weren't penalised too much. In the overall season count with the penalties conceded, 4 is just under the average number that penalties that we concede in a game. So you'd go, okay, that'll keep that down. But the thing that I always complain about is we don't receive the penalties. We just don't, even when it's a low penalty count, my belief, my stance is that when we are as disciplined as the Eels are, like we jump off the tackle in the rucks, we concede the fastest play the ball to other teams. We've talked about this ad infinitum, mate, where we are well and truly slower than every other team that we play against. So it varies between half a second and a second where our play the ball is slower than the opposition in literally every match. There might be 1 or 2 games at the most in a season where our play the ball speed is faster, but I'd be struggling to think of too many times where that happens. So we go out of our way. The Eels go out of their way to ensure that they do not concede repeat sets. They don't concede cheap penalties, where they don't concede 6 agains, that they try to have that as clean as possible, and to our detriment sometimes, because it means that we're jumping off players reasonably quickly in the tackle when a break is made. So our defence isn't set. But that's how strident we are in that endeavour. And the thing is, what ends up happening, and this is the point I'm trying to make, and I'm sorry for talking in circles, but but the point I was trying to make is that the referees then judge that this is a pretty clean game that's going on, because you've got one team, because there's one team there that just isn't giving away the 6 agains or the penalties. They put the whistle away. And whereas we should be receiving plenty of penalties because the other team's slowing it up, they've got that feel that things are flowing pretty quickly, because they are when the Eels are defending. It's flowing really freely for the opposition. They just think it's a nice, clean game. It's not. Fellas, it's not. The opposition's holding the Eels down. It happens every damn week. Every week. I'm over it. Sorry, rant done.
Yeah, I feel that one from the very core of my being, 60s. It certainly can be very, very frustrating watching games for the Eels in that regard.
And my apologies for spending that much time as when we got to the officials, and they haven't done anything wrong in this game yet. I should be taking the positive stance that there's nothing to worry about here. I shouldn't even be thinking about the referees before the game. So my apologies to any listeners who are thinking, "Oh, he's 60s. He's setting up an excuse for match officials being the cause for any problems that we have." So again, apologies for taking the time out from a preview to be concerned.
So on that preview aspect of the podcast, Eels obviously they're copping some hits left, right, and centre now, but they're also getting players back. Next week they get more players back provisionally. We're looking at Ryan Madison and Joe Ofahengaue rejoining the team, both from a calf injury. Funny how that works out there. With Sean Lane not too far off there, given that we've got the Dolphins, then the bye. So what do we do in this game? With the players available, it's a reasonable forward pack still. It's a good back line. Obviously, we're going to have big question marks at 5'8", but the Eels have matched up very well against the Bulldogs. We know they're going to pull a trick play or two. We know they're going to go to a Matt Burton bomb at some point. Where is this game won and lost on the Monday public holiday, 60s?
We play Parramatta football, which is basically, as BA has said, we have players that chase the collision, that carry the ball hard when it's time for yardage. Build up that platform through the middle, like win the middle, because the Bulldogs match up very well out wide, but we've got a distinct advantage through the centre of the field. So let's win that. Let's get the Bulldogs back pedalling. They don't respond well to being put under pressure, the Dogs, and that's really because they don't have that strength through the middle as yet. Now, they will rely on Matt Burton's big kicks. When they've been behind, they basically they go to the lottery option, don't they? They throw the ball to Burton, ego, mate, stick up one of your wobblies.
Mm-hmm.
And we know as well that a lot of those wobblies are going to be down the middle of the field because you can't control kicks like that if you're targeting out wide. If they happen to float towards the wing, that's simply because they've been carried that way by any of the wind direction that's there on the day, and combined with the way that the ball is spiraling through the air, and it's then subjected to any wind currents that are there. But he's not going to aim for the wing because there's too much chance that it will go over the sideline on the full. So Clint Gutherson's going to get plenty coming his way. They need to make sure that the communication between him and his wingers is at the best, because of the fact that, you might get some of them that sort of land in the middle between fullback and wingers positioning.
Mm-hmm.
I think Clint needs to be taking the lead with catching those awkward bombs. Sean had some problems, didn't he, when he first came back this season?
Very uncharacteristic, and it lingered across a couple of games. He looks to be in a better headspace under the high ball now, but like you said, Guffo is by far the best. I mean, not by far, because Mike is pretty good on the high ball, but Guffo is just so safe. So you'll be looking for him to really be trying to eat up all those high balls, those particular top bombs, and and really and also because it helps set up the other two for rucking out the ball on tackles 2 and 3. Like it's just like part of a bigger picture as much as anything else.
Yeah. Now it's not like Daejarn hasn't played first grade, so what we want from him is just keep it simple. Just if a kick needs to be put in, get that like as a foil to Mitch Moses. We trust that he can deliver the basics there. It doesn't have to be whiz bang. It doesn't have to be Mitch Moses type kicking. Much the same way as Dylan Brown isn't the huge foil for Mitch Moses. He's the occasional foil. So what we need, as I said, I don't want Daejarn overplaying his hand. I don't want him thinking too much about what he has to do. I just want him to go out there and get the basics done. Communicate with the people around him,
mm-hmm.
because that communication is so important when it comes to combinations. And I think we've seen that the Eels have been relatively consistent in their form this year, because I think their communication out on the field's been pretty good, and I think the combinations have been a little bit better settled. And although we've had the changes that are there in the front row, I think we've been starting to get some consistency with the back line and who's been available each week. As you said, we're paying the penance in the forwards this year. That was the backs last year. So, mate, I just want them to get the Parramatta football right this week.
Yep.
As I said, be strong in the collision, win the right to start using the ball. Don't overplay the offloads, but also don't put them away too much.
Yeah.
Like when we've got players there who have the skills that if it's on, it's on. And last time from memory, I think Cardi and Moses were really strong on the edge.
Yep.
Because I think the Bulldogs might have had an injury out wide.
Yes.
In the early part of the game.
Jacob Kiraz, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we really took advantage of that there. But the thing is that, and I think Addo Carr was out.
Yes, because he done his ankle the week before, maybe.
Yeah. So if anything, we might have had a bit of a pace advantage in that match. That doesn't exist this time.
No.
So, and of course, the other thing too is do what we did with Reed in the first.
Well,
play.
I do expect him to play a better game because he was close to our best on field in that particular contest.
Yeah.
So,
but the Eels know his game inside out. I expect him to have a better game, but I think that the Eels can handle what he has there, and they're just going to put him up. They're just going to keep him under pressure.
Yeah, and the big thing for me is obviously Reg Junior back. The two, by far our best bookends. I know Wiremu's had a fantastic season, but he wasn't unseating either of them as number one or number two on the pecking order, or really 1A, 1B to be more respectful to both of them. But Ofahengaue Ogden and Makasi Makatoa, they've earned some timeshare now. Like, they've put their hands up and they're putting the performances that should see them feature in rotation properly. I'm very interested to see how BA manages that front row rotation now. He should have a lot less reservations as opposed to earlier in the season to get these guys out there in more high leverage situations. So,
well, I think he has to be cognizant of the fact that Regan's coming back from a long time out. He's not going to have the match fitness there. That's not to say that he hasn't been doing plenty of running at training, because the training that I've seen, he's been running and running and running. While the first grade team has been going through their paces out in the training paddock, he's just been running. He's been strengthening the groin, but he's been getting the kilometres in his legs so that he doesn't lose too much condition, because big blokes like Junior and Reg, they can't afford time out where they're not active. And it stands to reason. And Reg always, the start of the pre-season, it's always a tough time for Reg. But he comes to hand really quickly. So I don't think this is going to be something that's going to carry on for a number of weeks. But I think BA will be conscious of that. And as you said, the other blokes have earned the right to have more game time. And that's exactly what we need when Reg is in his first week back.
Yep. And on that note, obviously the Eels, you talk about playing Parramatta football, you want to be dominating through the forwards. Do any forwards feature in your predictions, 60s? If we go to scorer, first try scorer, and best on field this week.
Okay. Score, I think it's going to be something in the vicinity of 30 to 24 to the Eels. I think it's going to be high scoring. I expect that the Bulldogs will pick up a few tries out wide. As far as first try scorer, I'm going to go with Mitch Moses as first try scorer. And although I'm expecting a big performance from the forwards, no, do you know what? I'm going to change my mind. I was going to go for the double for Mitch Moses to be best on field. I was just thinking, how much we need from the forwards this week. I think Jermaine Hopgood, mate, best on field.
I can see that. I'm going to go for the Eels to continue their really good and strong run of form with a victory in the vicinity of 26 or 28 to 10 or 12. I think the Bulldogs will jag a few tries there, or a couple of tries, probably off kicks and maybe like a trick play if we can't stifle or stifle it out. I will go. I mean, he came good for me earlier the year when I gave him the shout out. I'll go for Reg for first try scorer, and he'll be very vocal about it if he goes over a certain dummy half, I think. And for best on field, well, you mentioned him, and I think given the context of the game, so much will rest on the performance of Mitchell Moses, and therefore he is just the obvious guy. If he has the sort of game we need him to have, then he's going to be best on field, and probably, unfortunately for us, but obviously a deserved reward for him, pick up a Sky Blue jersey. So that's a problem we're going to have to talk about next week, because goodness, that is a big problem. But yeah, that's where we're at. We're both on Parramatta to win, obviously, even with all the handicaps and injuries. And yeah, 4:00 p.m. on King's long weekend birthday. Going to be good to see the Eels it's been a long break, 60s, a long break from Friday way back against the Cowboys to Monday. and then we back up on a Saturday to Manly. So yeah, interesting.
And we can't let this match go without that another shout out for Brad Arthur.
Oh yes,
with setting the new record for most games in charge of the Parramatta Eels. He moves to 244 moves. He's currently sitting with Brian Smith at 243. And again, a shout out to Steve Murphy, his assistant coach, who's been with him for now. This will be 238 of those games. He wasn't there when BA was the caretaker coach back in 2012, but Murph's been there from day one of the preseason in 2014. He's been BA's right-hand man. And also another shout-out as well to Craig Sultana. He's been with BA. He's the football manager. He's been there since 2016. So this is his 8th year at the club. And I think that consistency of the staff that have been there around the football club is a big part of what makes the football operation there like family.
Mm-hmm.
So well done everyone involved with these records, and looking forward to the team bringing home a win for Brad this week.
Well said, mate. Well said. And on that note, we'll sign off. Thank you for stopping by and giving us a listen. Looking forward to the Eels hopefully jagging 2 wins or bagging 2 wins. It might be a case of jagging in the New South Wales Cup 60s, but hopefully bagging in the NRL on the Monday public holiday.
Go you Eels.